Hello and welcome to Millads Game of Thrones Review Season 8 Episode 3 The Long Night. It's the first time I've done anything like this, so any kind of feedback would be perfect. Thank you and enjoy. After being shown Sansa, Arya and Sam in the walls of Winterfell, we're then shown a major thing of Melisandre approaching the army to defend Winterfell. She approaches Jorah and asks him to tell the Dothraki to raise their swords, or their araks, the curved scimitar weapons. So this doesn't really make much sense, because when we see the Dothraki raise them, she sets them on fire, but you can't set dragonglass on fire, meaning they were all using steel weapons. So if Melisandre didn't appear, what exactly was the Dothraki's plan? Was it just to charge against the undead army in the dark with their sponge-like weapons, as obviously it's not going to do anything? So this was a bit of a plot hole. I'll admit it looked cool with the fire dying out, but then it still doesn't really make much sense. We also see the Unsullied, the Army of the North, small army, and all the Dothraki outside the castle, which doesn't really make any sense either, because if you recall to Season 1, Ned said Winterfell can be held with 500 men against 10,000. That's a 20 to 1 ratio. We've been told the Army of the Dead has about 100,000 people. We can give them 200,000 to be generous. We know there's about 8,000 Unsullied, let's say 6,500 after the defeats from last season. There's about 5,000 people in the north, including all the women and the people fighting, but you've got at least 50,000 Dothraki. We know the Khalasar was about 80,000. So if we go based off those numbers, that's about 93,000. Let's round it down to 90,000. 90,000 times 20 is 1.8 million. They have an effective force of 1.8 million. We can also see later on in the episode how hard it was for the dead to rise up to the walls, as they were just being constantly shot down. And yes, there is obviously the question of the dragon, but wouldn't you just have Viserion, Rhaegal and Drogon just dealing with him? That's one major thing that I found quite irritating, how everyone was outside the walls of one of the best fortified castles in the north, if not the whole Seven Kingdoms. So in the second scene, we get a sick shot of the Dothraki with the fire charging at the army of the undead, which again doesn't really make much sense, but it looks cool cinematically, so I'll give them that. Then we see another shot of the siege weapons. We see trebuchets, which, as we all know, are the superior siege weapon, launching rocks of fire, I assume, at the undead. And we also see some catapults, which we know are completely useless, but it's 2019 and we can't discriminate. Then we finally see Ghost. We saw him last episode, but all he did was stand there. This episode, he's charging of Jorah, and we see the lights go out after they've charged in, slowly. It's like a dread moment, and everyone's kind of scared. And then we see Jorah ride back, which is like, alright, he really should have died there, but we can forgive that because he does die later. Thankfully, people needed to die, a lot more people needed to die in this episode, but where's Ghost? You're telling me Ghost came back for this, and just died like that, because we don't see him. But then you realise when you watch the preview for the next episode, nah, Ghost is alive for the next episode, which okay. In the next scene, we see the army of the dead swarming the Unsullied. Well, I'd like to say see, we mostly hear it because the lighting was god-awful for whatever reason. I guess it was showing the impending doom or whatever. Should have been a bit brighter so we could have actually seen the cinematography, but it's alright, I guess. And then we look at the Unsullied. Why are they not in a phalanx formation? There's way too many openings. If you look, there's openings in the sides of them, openings in between them themselves. Shouldn't they all be together with shields and long spears and just holding their ground? I thought these were some of the best fighters on the planet. Daenerys gave up a dragon. Well, we know what happened, but she gave up a dragon for 8,000. Master Krasnys said she couldn't afford them with what she had. They're super expensive. These guys are meant to be some of the best fighters on the planet. But then we see Grey Worm. Why is Grey Worm scared? Okay, I get he loves Missandei, but wasn't the whole point of the Unsullied they don't fear anything? Not even death. The whole point is to stand and die for whoever owns them. So yes, the three men, yes, Grey Worm loves someone, but I thought it was a bit cheap how his whole storyline went and how they're showing fear on the Unsullied. They don't fear death at all, and what they're facing right now is a literal death. During the initial swarm, I believe Brienne and Pod should have died right here. We see Brienne telling everyone to stand their ground with what seems to be the army of the Vale behind her, as we can see by the sigil on the shields, with Jaime beside her. And if we got the death of Brienne and Pod right here, we'd understand there's no messing about, there's no jokes, this is serious, this is literally death. We'd see that the Army of the Dead doesn't care for any named characters. If Brienne, because her story arc was completed already with being a knight, with Brienne and Pod dying here, that's what I wanted to see. But instead we got this. We got Brienne getting a fake out death, with Jaime saving her. I thought we got enough fake out deaths after last season, but how wrong I was as I continued to watch this episode. After Jaime saving Brienne, we're quickly met with Jon and Daenerys spitting dragon fire all over the battlefield, which they really should have done earlier, besides sacrificing all the Dothraki, but I guess they had to learn from their mistakes or whatever. Speaking of dragonfire, I've always wondered how much friendly fire there is. Get it? Friendly fire. Fuck's sake. I mean, we get to see Jon seeing the White Walkers and trying to kill them, which is exactly what Jon would do. This is completely in his character, but he's abrupted by a snowstorm, by what we later see to be created by the Night King. So I'll give them props for this. This was pretty well done. A good 10 seconds right here. In the next scene, we see Sam being a coward as usual, which is in his character, but I thought he would have been a bit more brave after killing a Fen, a White Walker, and standing up to his dad, but I guess not. We see Ed save him, and he pays the price. I was really sad to see Ed die, but it made perfect sense. He needed to die there. You can't just have everyone surviving. But that did get me thinking. Loads of people would die this episode, but again, I was completely wrong. Besides him and Jorah, nobody really died that was important. Even these two weren't really that important anyway. They were loved, but they weren't important. Next, we see Sansa going to the crypts after Arya tells her to go down there. I thought this was a really nice scene and mirrored the Battle of Blackwater really well, when Sansa was with all the other women and children in the Red Keep, calming them down, making believe that Stannis wouldn't breach the walls. This is why I really like this scene, and would have loved it if Sansa said something to calm the people down. But I guess, when you have an undead army outside, what can you really say to these people? They're not going to believe you if you don't believe it yourself. Next we see Jon and Dany clash on their dragons, Rhaegal and Drogon in the snowstorm. They seem to have gone for another love ride instead of helping their armies. I mean, not exactly the right time, guys, but young love, am I right? Fuck's sake. We see Tormund and Brienne call for a retreat, and of course the commander inside the walls is who other but 10-year-old Lyanna Bloody Mormont, the character that I hate the most in the show, right after Arya. She's 10 years old. You can't put a 10-year-old girl or boy, so don't call me sexist, a 10-year-old anything, inside a castle, have it command them, and then not be afraid of the dead. Okay, I understand Lyanna Mormont's mother and her aunties were great warriors, Mage Mormont, etc., but, bro, she's literally 10 years old. She is half the size of my right leg. I don't understand why she's there, why she's commanding them, and how many people had to die to save her later on. It's just a bit, you know, fan service. Not really cool. Now we have the trenches trying to be lit, but unfortunately they can't, as Daenerys can't see the signal, and the fire from the arrows isn't powerful enough, as it's way too cold outside because of the White Walkers and the Whites, as we saw in season 6, when they were outside the cave with the three-eyed raven. They just put out the fire. So we have to get Melisandre to light it, even though Jon is 50 meters away, as we see in the next scene. But he's like, nah, this ain't my job. I'm an Iron Man. I stand alone. Wait, wrong thing anyway. So we have Melisandre lighting it. Thought this is the part maybe she sacrificed herself, because she said she'd be dead by tomorrow or something, but she just lit the trench with no real consequence. Made for a decently cool scene, but we all know it was going to light on the very last try after her failing a bunch, which was basically the same as Jon's arrival. Then got a sick shot of fire in Melisandre's eyes, and damn, Carice Van Houten is peng. I wish I was that piece of wood she was touching for a solid 2 minutes. I would have burst into flames a lot faster, if you know what I mean. Okay, guys? Because wood and touching, because no? Anyway, we see Clegane scared by fire for the 84th time, and we get it. The Hound hates fire like D&D hates illogical story making. What's new? You don't have to remind us every single season. Gets a bit old, unlike Lyanna Mormont, unfortunately. Next scene, we're met with Theon talking to Bran. He apologises to Bran for what he did. Bran basically forgives him in his own cryptic way. Absolute weirdo this guy is. I think this was really great for Theon, as his personality was split. As if you remember when he was talking to Ramsay, he said his real father died in King's Landing, alluding to Ned. So it really means a lot to him to be finally accepted in Winterfell. And if you look at his eyes, you can just see it in his eyes, because Alfie Allen is a great actor. Props to him. Yeah, perfect acting right here. And then Bran says he needs to go. Theon says go where? And Bran doesn't say anything. Just goes off to watch the hottest sex scenes of Westeros history. No? Oh, okay, seems he goes into some ravens so we can get this sick cinematic shot of the Night King riding Viserion above Winterfell. Fortunately, we got this really disgusting shot of his dirty fingernails. Like, seriously, my guy, give them a trim. Alright, we see the army of the dead piling onto the trenches to power out the fire, or in order for the other whites to climb over each other so they can breach Winterfell. We see Davos on the battlements looking over, and he says possibly the three dumbest words of the episode. Man the walls. Man the walls? Man the bloody walls? What do you mean, man the walls? You telling me this whole time, with all this time to prepare, the walls weren't manned? What on earth were they doing? Singing campfire songs and eating marshmallows? Nah, this is just taking a piss. Why are the walls not manned? So we can see a cool little clip of a bunch of longbowmen getting on top of the battlements. Like, seriously, what on earth is this? This is just taking it too far. Why are the walls not manned? This is so... Anyway, we see the arm of the dead get past the smallest trench of all time. I mean, seriously, this is the most useless trench I've ever seen. It literally does nothing. It does nothing. They start coming in to climb on top of each other to get into Winterfell, and we see that, and there's just basic siege defense. Jon, instead of quickly using his dragon to blast the massive horde for a few seconds, decides to look up, and what do you know? It's the Night King. He starts following him with his massive balls and little IQ, and he starts a little dragon chase, again, doing nothing. And what do we get here? Oh! It's a Jaime fake death scene with Brienne saving him. Here's where I thought Brienne would finally die this episode, but no, still alive. And wait, what's the scene after this? Oh no! Sam's dying! Oh, wait, no, Jorah saved him as well. So that's Sam's second fake out death now? Does anyone die in this episode of importance? Seriously? Why? Bro, just let him die. Christ. After Sam's fake out death, we get something we've never seen before in Game of Thrones. Ever. It's the Hound! Sandor of House Clegane is scared by fire. This is a crazy new revelation. But seriously, twice in one episode, come on, we get it. Hound good, fire good. Hound and fire, bad bad. Now we get Ninja Arya getting a montage of killing whites, which actually makes sense. She had a lot of training of a bow staff, and that's the exact weapon she's using here. And we get to see the design that she gave to Gendry, where it splits into two dragonglass daggers. I really like this, it made sense, it was cool. Now we get to my favourite part of the episode. This is at the time. We get to see the giant fucking raid into the Winterfell and just bitch slap Lyanna Mormont. There is no greater satisfaction seeing one of the characters you hate get slapped by a giant. I mean, seriously. Watching her fly was the funniest shit of all time. And now, oh, we're back onto Clegane, who's given up, but Beric gives him the sick one-liner. The Hound says, we can't beat death. Beric points at Arya, tell her that. Very convenient wording, okay. And then Clegane gets over his fear of fire in the moment to save Arya, who's in trouble on the roofs. I mean, I really like this, as the Hound protected Arya in the Riverlands for the longest time, and this was a nice throwback, as he really is like her father figure and her protector. And we're back on the giant. Now this giant is the dumbest giant of all time. This giant, who seconds prior was swinging like a maniac, killing everyone and everything, takes some interest in a 10-year-old girl and pulls her up to her eye. I mean, is this Jimmy Savile or a white? Either way, Lyanna Mormont sticks him with a dragonglass dagger. I mean, really? Yes, Tormund said he killed a giant when he was 10, but he was obviously lying. That was bullshit. That's his character. I kind of like this though, but I also at the same time don't how she killed a giant, as there are theories of Lyanna being Tormund's daughter, but this wasn't really touched on in the show. But Lyanna killing a giant was pure fan service, as a lot of her scenes have been. It's like, why is Jimmy Savile, the giant, taking a special interest in this little girl? It really makes no sense if you think about it. So, doesn't Dragonglass kill all whites instantly? Wouldn't the giants actually be useless? Wouldn't you just poke them in the leg or shoot one Dragonglass arrow anywhere and they die? Did the writers forget how Dragonglass works? Am I wrong? Someone help me here. We're back onto the two most useless people to ever do anything in this battle. Jon Targaryen and Daenerys Targaryen, who keep forgetting there's 1,000,001 whites, but decide to follow the Night King. We then see the Night King on Viserion, Asplas Dany, with icy dragonfire. Nice save. But his AoE ability completely misses. And oh, spin switch! We are onto Arya and another ninja montage. This time it's stealth, so we're past fighting. Now I have to see if she has 99 white dodging to get past him in the library. And of course she does. This is what she was actually trained in. It makes sense. And I accept this. It just took way too much screen time. She gets out, and then we get the cliche of the other door breaking down and the zombies coming after her. But she runs into Beric Dondarrion and the Hound, both of which save her. Beric takes a shank in the leg and a million other shanks in the body, and they get into the other door. And you can see here Beric holds the door, but like Jesus, which kind of makes sense because he's been revived. So he's like, yeah, I kind of like that. But I don't know how he managed to get into the door, into the other room with the Hound and Arya after being shanked 76 times, but I guess he just used the same teleportation spell as Peter Baelish in the earlier seasons. But yeah, and now we're in the room, and Melisandre tells Arya that Beric served his purpose and he has nothing left to do. And she reminds him of what he said, of what she said to her in season 3, of how she will close green eyes, brown eyes, and then she says, and blue eyes. And at the time, I didn't really take much. I was like, okay, she's going to kill a White Walker. Not the Night King. Oh, fuck my life. But anyway, and I'm like, okay, it's a bit cheesy. And then she says, what do we say to the God of Death? As Sirius said to Arya in season 1, and that's in line with her saying you know nothing to Jon Snow back in season 5. So that makes sense, if not a bit cheesy. And Arya says not today and skirts off. And if only at the time I knew what was going to happen, but whatever. Right, we're back onto the Night King on Viserion. He breathes magical fire which destroys part of the castle. Remember this, it's important for later, I promise you. Remember that. Jon comes in with Rhaegal and wrestles Viserion whilst Theon and Ironborn underneath are protecting Bran. We now see the Night King... Daenerys then ganks the Night King, smacking Viserion with Drogon, causing the Night King to drop to the ground, as well as Rhaegal having to land because of the injuries as he was wrestling with Viserion. Daenerys sees the Night King and sets him ablaze with her magical Jacaris, but for some reason, this doesn't kill the Night King. Why does this not kill the Night King? Why are the White Walkers invulnerable to Valyrian steel but then don't die to Dragonfire? We know Valyrian steel is made from Dragonfire. Maybe this wasn't touched on in the show, but I'm pretty sure it was. So this was kind of... I just don't understand it. And of course, the Night King gives the cockiest smirk of all time. And this right here is how I knew this show's gone to shit. I did not like him smirking, and then when I saw him smirk, I knew he was going to die a retarded death this episode, which is exactly what happened. And of course, he tries to yeet his ice spear at Dany, and he misses. Jon sees the Night King not dying to Dragonfire, so he does what every smart person does, and follows him. So the Night King, being the alpha male he is, shows us what super male vitality can do, and raises a bunch of dead people. These dead people surround Jon, and for some reason the next time we see Jon, despite being surrounded by about 500 whites, he's completely safe. This was just irritating. There was no consequences in this episode for people's mistakes. And this also brought me onto a point. If the Night King can revive people, I saw this on the ASOIF subreddit, shout out to whoever wrote it, but why doesn't every living member just get a dragon glass piercing somewhere so they don't come back to life? It's a really good idea, but I guess the show writers can't think of good ideas anymore. Well, they really never did. We finally see the White Walkers come in, as they've been hanging at the back all episode. They come in with the Night King to find Bran, and then we move on to the crypts, which, surprise surprise, aren't safe at all, despite other characters last episode saying it would be safe. We see whites from the walls, which this should be a massive thing, because the only people buried in the crypts are the Kings of Winterfell, and then you have Lyanna Stark, Brandon Stark, because Ned Stark had them buried there, and then you have Rickon Stark, because Jon wanted them buried there. So Sansa having no emotional reaction to this was a bit underwhelming, as the significance of people buried there I personally thought would have a bigger reaction or a bigger part to play. We see Drogon walk into multi-area and gets piled and shanked by a bunch of whites. For whatever reasons decides to say fuck off to Dany, drops her, and takes off after getting shanked a million times. But oh, is that Dany gonna die? Nope, it's a friend zone saving her. And we're on to the next scene. We get this really emotional scene between Tyrion and Sansa, which I and many others thought was a suicide pact, as of how it was portrayed with the music, Tyrion kissing Sansa's hand and then Sansa pulling out the dagger, but it amounted to nothing, of course. It was just, I don't even know what it was. And then we see Jon charging into Winterfell, Viserion blasts icy fire, and Jon hides behind a wall on 3 different occasions, despite, as I said earlier, the icy dragon fire destroying the walls. So, again, the writers forgetting what they wrote themselves in the same episode. Really interesting, actually. There's too many inconsistencies. And we're back to Jorah the Andal, where Sir Friendzone dies protecting Dany. This was probably one of the best deaths in all of the show, as he was both protecting his queen, the person he loved, and he died fighting the dead as his father would have wanted him to because his father wanted him to join the Night's Watch, so in a way he did. But Bran comes back from his wank, tells Theon he's been a good man and thanks him, so Theon charges into the Night King and dies, fulfilling his arc. And this was a really good death, as Theon's character is now completed, and he finally felt at home and accepted for what he did. It was a really sad death as well, but I'm sad to see Elf Yellen go, as his portrayal of Theon was perfect. And Jon Snow decides to do probably the most alpha thing I've ever seen, and yells at a dragon. I read this comment, if you look at it from Jon's perspective, he yelled at a dragon and all the undead died, so he must feel like a god right now. But back to the main story. Bran's just come back from his bank, as I just said, and somehow him and the Night King are monologuing, even though nobody says a word. So this gives Arya enough time to sneak past 1,000,000 whites and catapult herself onto the Night King. The Night King chokes her out, but of course, the Valyrian steel dagger, the cat's paw, drops into her other hand, and she shanks him in the stomach. It's a lot of shank in this episode. This was probably the worst way to have the climax of the White Walkers. This is probably worse than Dexter becoming a lumberjack. Like, Arya has no affiliation with the Night King, her story has nothing to do with him, and yet she's the one to kill him. I would have accepted Arya killing him, if it was properly foreshadowed, like the line Mel said to Arya about green eyes, brown eyes and blue eyes, but that was in Season 3, which was 7 years ago, and D&D said they only knew about Arya killing the Night King 3 years ago. There was literally no foreshadowing of this, there was no reason for it to happen, it makes no sense. So what about Jon? What happens to him? His whole story was the Night King, his arc goes nowhere. Now it won't be completed. I would rather have had the cheesiest 1v1 battle of Jon versus him and Jon killing him, or even a 1v1 of Jon and the Night King with Jon saying he can't kill him, and then Arya stabs him in the back like Howland Reed did with Ser Arthur Dayne and Ned Stark at the Tower of Joy. That would be way better than Arya catapulting from nowhere, because there's no walls in the Godswood, and there's no trees she would have been on except the God's Tree, so I don't know how that happened, the Werewood Tree, sorry. And seeing how close Bran was to the Night King, why not just give Bran a little dragon glass dagger so he can just kill him if he comes close? Literally anything better than that. The worst part, it wasn't even how he died. It was the fact that now we know nothing about the White Walkers. What did we know besides they wanted to kill everyone? That's not how George writes. That's just terrible writing. So the whole point of the things that we saw in the very first episode, the very first thing we saw with the White Walkers, the whole point was just to kill everything. They waited 8,000 years to come and kill everything. Really. It also doesn't make sense how Arya wasn't turned into a White Walker the second the Night King touched him. He touched Viserion, turned them into a White. He touched the babies, turned them into White Walkers. Was this just the writers forgetting, or is Arya somehow immune to becoming a White Walker? It makes no sense how they made Arya kill him. The preferred of one of the plenty of theories online, such as the Night King bowing to Bran. What if the Three-Eyed Raven was the evil one? What about anything that literally what just happened? Genuinely can't think of a worse ending than Arya jumping out of nowhere and stabbing the Night King. Now we have 3 episodes and what? Cersei's the final boss? With the shitty pirate Euron? You have 2 dragons, just go set them all on fire. Makes no sense how the... Not only had the Night King die in episode 3, if they had him die in episode 3, they should have done it a different way. Let us know more about the undead. So what kind of problem will these guys face now? They've just killed the biggest army ever. They've killed an undead army, an undead dragon, an undead king, and now they're going to kill Cersei? But they have 2 dragons, it's not even fair. Just nothing of that made sense. How did Arya sneak past 1,000,000 whites and a bunch of White Walkers? Yeah, she has good stealth, but seriously, not a single person saw her. And even though that she killed him, she should have died. There should have been at least some kind of consequence. Maybe it's like a suicide attack. That would have made a bit more sense, but Nope, everyone lives happy ever ending, and now we have this. Thank you guys for watching. This is the first time I've ever done a video like this. I'd like to give a massive shout out to the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit for loads of crazy theories and lots of sense, because I couldn't have come up with all of this myself. But yeah, thank you to all the people on there, and hopefully the reception is good so I can make more videos like this.